Hey everybody, Jane here, and today I'm doing a review on the book The Golden Hawk. This is a book that was written in the 1940s, and the story itself takes place in the 1600s. So it is a historical novel. It's a pirate story with a heavy romantic plot. The basic plot of this book is there is a pirate named Kit, and he is traveling the seas. He rescues Jane, the red-headed girl, who half the time is called Rouge for her hair. But I feel like, if I recall, in the book he gives her the nickname, and I didn't necessarily like that. I want to give her her name back. He can call her what he wants, but her name is Jane, like me. So he rescues Jane after she has just been raped and her sister has been murdered on another ship. Now, that other ship was run by, or captained by, or whatever, a guy named Don Luis del Toro. And Don Luis del Toro had a hand in the murder of Kit's mother. And Kit has been trying to get his revenge on this guy his entire life. So we learn about this as Kit is rescuing Jane. He gets her on the boat, and at first things seem okay. He gives her a pistol and puts her in his cabin and says, if anybody comes in here to try to touch you, shoot them, because she is a girl who has just been raped on a ship of pirates. Not the most moralistic people in the world. However, Kit decides to be a dumbass and goes in and kisses her, and so she shoots him. And from that moment on, he is angsty in love with her. Now, she jumps off the side of the ship and swims away, and comes back later as a female pirate. We meet her again as a female pirate who is trying to also kill Don Luis del Toro because he raped her and had a hand in the murder of her sister. So they kind of go hand in hand with this thing, but Kit is angsty in love with Jane, and they're both trying to kill this same person who has been involved in the death of people in their lives. There's another player in this story. The sides are not because I don't love it. This is actually one of my favorite books from childhood. When I was in my early 20s, late teens, this was my favorite novel. As a matter of fact, I still have like 3 or 4 copies of it. It is a good book. It is just complicated to explain without giving too much away. So Kit, at one point, abducts the fiance of Don Luis del Toro, who is a young woman. She's 19? Let's say 19. And Don Luis del Toro is 50s, I would say. Like, he's an older guy. And so Don Luis del Toro's wife, soon-to-be wife, develops a terrible crush on Kit. Now, Kit is being a complete gentleman with her because he's in love with Jane. So you've got Bianca is in love with Kit. She's going to marry Don Luis del Toro. Kit is in love with Jane. Jane keeps rebuffing him and his attentions. And Kit and Jane are trying to kill Don Luis del Toro. There's also a character who is kind of the sidekick for Kit named Bernardo. And Bernardo, in my opinion, is the best character in the whole book. He is loyal. He is kind of the voice of reason when there is no other voice of reason. And a lot of times Kit is not thinking with the right head, and so there's not a lot of reason happening. I totally understand why this was my favorite book growing up. Reading it as an adult with a little bit of distance, but still quite a bit of nostalgia, this book was a 4 out of 5 for me. I do have to forgive it a lot of its flaws and things that I didn't like because of the time it was written in, and also the time the story takes place in. So consent is a huge issue in this book. You would think that it would not be, because we make such a big deal of, Jane is going to go kill the guy who raped her and killed, like, involved in the murder of her sister, who also was raped. But Kit has some issues with the consent thing. He'll be like insistent upon kissing her and stuff, even when she doesn't really want to the point of, she's whipping him and leaving like lash marks all over his body, or she's got a sword to his chest and he's bleeding, and he still insists that he's going to kiss her and he don't care. So consent is kind of an issue, like, so much. Another thing that's an issue is women are not treated very well or sensibly in this book. Now, it is written by a man, so, that I think is a thing, and it is probably more of an adventure story, and the audience was more men. But I know there was one point in the book that I got so angry because Bianca said something about, or the narrator, the narrative voice, said something about Bianca playing head games, like all women do. And I was just like, not all women play head games, buddy. It's funny that even in the 1940s, men are always like, oh, they're just playing head games. No, women don't just play head games. But another thing that was a bit problematic was the treatment of, like, servants. There is a servant to Bianca, and there is, I don't know if I have that quote here, but there was something about her. It said, for common with most servants, there was nothing she enjoyed more than eavesdropping. And I know that kind of those broad generalizations without characterization were more common in books of this time and previous to. And I've heard people complain about the same kind of treatment of servants and some classism in Agatha Christie's writing. So I'm going to assume it was just the times being older that we assume people who are servants are people. So I didn't love those things. Also, there was some things that could be considered racist, except that I'm not sure it was. Number one, it is appropriate for the 1600s. They were talking, the narrator and somewhat the characters was talking about the Caribbean slaves. And particularly, like, which slaves from which places were better at different work. And it just struck me as that seems really racist now. However, at the time that this was written, in the time that it is set in, that probably was things that were the way people thought about things. Also, the author of this book, I don't know if there's a picture of him in the back. He is, I am pretty sure, biracial. So I feel like we can give him a pass if it seems racist, because, I mean, I think he was just trying to accurately represent people. I don't think he was racist himself, because, as I said, I believe he's biracial. Now, that sounds like a lot of complaints about this book, but there's a lot of really good stuff in this book, too. So this is a great adventure story. There's some really cool things that are happening as Kit and Jane are trying to go and take out Don Luis del Toro. There is some absolutely amazing dialogue, some of the best, wittiest, tongue-in-cheek, ironic dialogue. I love it. The writing of this book is amazing, and the dialogue is snappy, and just, I am in love with this dialogue. And I definitely can see in my own writing, I'm dialogue heavy, and I can see an influence from this book, because I've probably had read this book as a teenager 5 or 6 times. The only book I'd probably read more often than this was Harry Potter. So Harry Potter was, it came a little later for me, so this was beforehand, but it was slightly more read than this, but not very much. But this is a really fun adventure story, despite the fact that it is an older story. And it is very much a victim of its time. Kit being angsty and insta-lovey was frustrating, but I think, especially my young self, found that very romantic, as teenagers do. Teenagers do, at the time, I would have loved, or maybe even did love, Twilight. And so that angsty, insta-lovey, absolutely pathetic, stupid level of devotion that now would annoy the crap out of me as a reader was very romantic. Like, oh, he's pursuing her all over the place, and Bianca's basically throwing herself at him, but he just wants Jane. So, so there is that, that swept away, nostalgic, romantic thing of the times. Now, I did read this actually as part of the reading rush, and I watched the movie. And I did want to comment a little bit about the movie, which, by the way, is available on YouTube. Do not buy the movie, because it's available on Turner Classic Movie and on Amazon, or it was. Do not buy it. Be careful if you buy it. So I bought the movie, and we could not play it on anything. We have a PlayStation 4, a PlayStation 3, a DVD player, a PC, none of it. It would not play on any of it. So we ended up returning it to Amazon, which really made me sad, but ultimately I was able to watch it through YouTube. So I'm sad because, with YouTube, you never know if something is going to be there tomorrow. People could take their stuff down, a channel could get disabled, and I would be sad to lose this because it was a really good version of this. And it's really interesting to see the differences. For one thing, in the movie, Kit is much more of a womanizer. We don't see him being a womanizer prior to Jane or Bianca. I mean, we know he's attractive, but we don't see him being a womanizer. Where in the movie, he is very much a womanizer. He has this feel about that he uses to seduce women, or he's all like, here, I'm going to give you my pistol. If I do anything you don't like, just shoot me. And like, that's his line in the movie. In the book, he only does that to Jane, and because she was just a victim of rape and is scared and is in his cabin. Now, in the movie, she is not a victim of rape. She was kidnapped by Don Luis del Toro, but probably because the movie was made in the 1950s, they couldn't do the whole rape thing. So in the movie, she was just kidnapped and is upset about being kidnapped and is a female pirate. And so that's how she ends up on the boat with Kit, and then she, in the movie, gets his gun, and he's all like, if I do anything you don't like, just shoot me. And she goes to bed with the gun, and he comes in and kisses her without her consent, because still, apparently, in the 1950s, we weren't too worried about consent, and she shoots him. So that was interesting. There was some other deviations, especially in the ending of the movie versus the book. This book has a bit of a slow ending. Like, I love everything up till about a quarter to the end, and by about to the quarter to the end, I was like, okay, let's just move it along here. Move it along. I know what happens, let's just do this. All the reveals have been, we know what's going on, we know who's who, who's what, who's done what, let's just go. And this also does not have a very happy ending for many of the characters, whereas the movie, they did give it a happy ending to basically everybody. Everybody ended up where they needed to be, and it was fine. The movie also didn't have a lot of their better adventure moments. There are some, or they changed the adventure moments, I guess. And you know, this is it's not a long book, but there's a lot going on in this book that is very high adventure. So I understood why some of the things they just didn't have time for in the movie. But there's especially a jailbreak scene in the book that I would have loved to see in the movie. It was good. One thing I will say, though, about the 1950s movie that I could not believe, because it was hilarious but also crazy, is I felt like they were using the pistol that he keeps giving everybody as like a phallic symbol, like a hey, 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 we can't talk about this, but a nod to it. Just the way the pistol is handled, like in the last episode, or the last part of the show, where he finally, at the end, gives it to Jane and is all like, hey. Just the way it's handled and stuff, I was like, oh, that's a penis reference. So The movie was good. It was very 1950s, and this book is good. It's just very 1940s. If you love adventure stories and you love witty dialogue and you love a lot of action, this is a great book. If you can get past the fact that it is what it is. It was written in the 1940s about the 1600s, and the treatment of women and the treatment of minorities and the treatment of classes is all what it was. And consent is not really taken into account. Nothing serious. Well, okay, nothing extremely serious. Like, obviously, don't kiss girls if they don't want to be kissed. But like, he doesn't rape her or anything. Whereas I have actually read some romance novels where there's rape, and there's not rape in here. There's some pushiness, but definitely we get the impression that Jane is not actually against what is being done to her at any point. She protests a little bit, but she gets over it. So, not great, but again, written by a man, is a pirate story, sign of the times. I feel like this is how it was done. I do recommend them. I do enjoy this. This is one of multiple copies I have, so I think I'm actually going to pass one of these on to my brother and let him enjoy it. He's much more for adventure stories than I am. This adventure story I enjoyed years ago, not so much for adventure stories now. So I think I'm going to do that, and yeah, I may read more Frank Yerby. I do have several Frank Yerby books. For a while I was collecting them, but I never found, of the ones I had read, and mind you, I read them as a teenager, so my opinions may have changed. I never found one I loved as much as I love The Golden Hawk, so I didn't continue on, but apparently this writer, it says over 2.5 million in print just for this book, so he must have been very popular for the time. And yeah, I don't think this was one of his more popular books. I know he has a couple others that I've heard, like, if you say Frank Yerby, people know about. But I might read more by him, or I might just take the memories and this nostalgia and just accept that things are never as good as we remember them. So it's a little sad, not as good as I remember it, but still above average's book. Alright guys, this is Jane. My social media is below if you would like to connect with me. If you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do so if you would like more content. Have you read The Golden Hawk or other Frank Yerbys? If so, do you have any recommendations for, like, the best Frank Yerby? If I really like this one, I just have some, like, issues with what it is in the times and things like consent and stuff. Are there any books that he has that maybe don't have those issues so much? Is that just this is a pirate story and that's why we have this? Or is that just the times? So yeah, drop me some recommendations of other Frank Yerbys or other books that I might enjoy that are similar to this, preferably with a little less adventure. Like, if you have a version of that that's a romance, I could do that. I could do that. That is not Johanna Lindsey, because she did a piratey Mallory thing, and I already read that one. It was good, but I already read it. Also, I am an author. I write romance. No surprise there. Some of my books are on Kindle Unlimited. All of my books are on Amazon. If you would like to check them out and either read free on Amazon or on Kindle Unlimited or download a sample on Amazon, the link to that is down there as well. Until next time, guys, this is Jane. Bye.